My talk today is about securing your legacy from a path from being founder to evergreen, and really about the path to multi-generational family ownership. So you're all here because you believe in the evergreen proposition of being purpose-driven, profitable, enduring, market leading, and private. Dave started us off today talking about the proposition of private. We're learning a lot about purpose-driven. I personally believe in the fact that private is the key. That it's probably no surprise to you that that would be the position I would take. I work 100% with family-owned enterprises. Most of them are private and want to stay that way. In fact, many of the families I work with actually have a part of their mission statement that says their goal is to be family-owned forever. Why would you want to be family owned forever? So it allows you to run your business with purpose and values, right? But, and Dave harkened back to Josh Barron coming in the past couple years, it also provides a very low cost, patient source of capital to grow your business at the pace that you want. And beyond patient capital, it provides a strategic advantage that allows you to focus on your stakeholders, your owners, your employees, your customers, and your community, something that allows you to look beyond just a near-term return. And finally, for the families that I work with, they get a great emotional value and benefit out of being part of a long-term family legacy. So this private piece, the key being private, there are a lot of different ways that you can be private, and I've been really inspired to speak to those of you that I've gotten to meet over the past couple days about different models of being private. For instance, I'm going to call out the corporationship that I learned about, a version of partnership. Last night, but you could aspire to a partnership model similar to what I'm used to in a professional services firm, where you have a select number of your employees who, through both possibly tenure as well as achievement, earn the right to buy into your firm and then sell out over time. You might also think about bringing in a silent financial partner, someone who's willing to allow you to continue to have strategic direction but provide funding to you. You might think about employee ownership. I know a number of you have ESOP structures, and that's something that you've taken on debt in order to create opportunities for employee ownership over time. But again, as you might suspect, I'm fully down in that bottom bucket with 100% family ownership. And the reason is I believe it provides the most patient source of low-cost capital to grow your enterprise over time. All these other models have some either end game or some significant requirement to be buying out people that, if you do the right things in terms of your purpose and legacy and get your family to be committed with you, hopefully you're not in that position. And I'll talk a little bit today, because that can be the daunting part of how do I end up with an ownership group that wants to stick with me over time. So Dave encouraged me to share a story, and I was a bit daunted because I thought about it, and I'm like, I'm actually the anti-family business speaker. So for any of you who have worked with family business consultants, many of them come from family business backgrounds. Some successful, actually a lot failed. I don't have a family business background. I have the anti-family business background. So go back 3 generations. My dear grandfather, who died in his 90s a couple of years ago, was a 3rd-generation Iowa farmer. Unfortunately, he was not the eldest son, and so he didn't inherit the family land. He came back from World War II to a brand new wife and a baby son, and he had to figure out what he was going to do. He didn't have access to the land that his older brother did, and so he ended up leasing land and over time scraping by and having the opportunity to acquire some on his own. But truthfully, it was a pretty tough life. So fast forward to when my father gets ready to go off to college. By the way, he's the baby in the story, the eldest son, and my grandfather says, do not go into farming. Do not be dependent on the weather, on commodity prices, and on the availability of good land. Go do something that will provide a secure future. My father listened, and that's exactly what he did. He spent his entire career in a series of Fortune 500s, starting at Sears Roebuck, ending at Citibank, and actually going through acquisitions and never looking for a job a day in his life. So fast forward to me, what's the surprise in this? What was the story to me? Go to college and and find career stability. Take accounting classes, no psychology, no philosophy. And I've told a couple people here, I took one psychology class. My dad said he wouldn't pay for college if I did that. I sort of snuck it in under the radar screen. It turned out to be helpful in working with families, who knew? But my mission was career stability, so I am not a risk taker. Although I did just take my shoes off, so there you go. So what qualifies me to speak to a room full of inspiring, entrepreneur, founder, risk takers, business owners? Precisely because I don't have that in my DNA, I have an incredible awe and respect for people who do what you do, who have come together to build something bigger than yourselves, who have taken great risks, and many of whom, if you're not already, aspire to be multi-generational. So the good news is I have spent the last 20 years honing a career in practical business skills from investment banking, McKinsey Consulting, and getting a PhD in strategy at Wharton, and trying to unleash that on helping families figure out how to create generational continuity. I have the great good fortune of being able to do that through the John L. Ward Center for Family Enterprise at Kellogg, where for the past 20 years we have conducted executive education programs, MBA courses, research community building, unfortunately in the past year more webinars than I can count, to help families achieve continuity. And through that, I have had the opportunity to be surrounded by just inspiring business leaders, actually many of whom are members of Tugboat, and hopefully more will be in the future. So what have I learned in working with these people? First and foremost, family enterprise is very complex. As you all know, your business is incredibly complex. You're constantly having to think about adapting and changing. Think about what we talked about in the workplace in the past year, right? Incredible amount of change. The problem with a family enterprise is you've got additional stakeholders that you don't have in other models, including both your family and ownership. They all have unique goals and objectives they're trying to achieve, and they all want to be involved in some way in decision making. So it's really important to understand this perspective. This three-circle model is something, if any of you ever come to the classroom in Kellogg, that you would see. So let me give you a simple example of how this might work from the founder perspective. You're a founder, you have 3 kids, you aspire to be multi-generational. You have a daughter, she's the middle, you think she's the most likely to be the best leader of the business, so you want to elevate her to a president title to help groom her for the CEO position. Well, how does this affect the people in these various stakeholder circles? You, your wife, her peers, her siblings are all owners. Their biggest concern might be, gee, Dad, you drove a great return in this business, you've grown it, it's profitable, but is our sister going to be able to do that going forward? Oh, and by the way, as father, is she going to be able to generate enough of a return to continue to grow the business at the size our family grows? On the business side, no business is run by one person, right? You're a successful CEO, you've got a team around you. How are they going to feel about your daughter being elevated to the president role? And do they feel like she's going to be the leader that you were? Tough to fill a founder's shoes. Finally, from the family standpoint, how is elevating your daughter going to affect the harmony within your family? How will that be viewed by your siblings? And how personally is it going to affect your relationship with her? So a lot to consider, significant amount of complexity. Tough part is, second lesson to you is what got you to succeed over the past few years when you think in multi-generational family continuity will not get you to the next generation. Because just as your business evolves, these circles evolve. Again, pretty practical example. Your family circle evolution largely out of your control. Perhaps you can control how many children you have, but good luck trying to control how many children they have, if they stay married or if they get divorced, if they happen to marry someone and you inherit some adopted children, stepchildren, no way to tell what your family tree is going to look like and how they're going to feel about this family business. The ownership circle, good news, a little bit more within your control, but still really challenging. And these are the issues that I've heard in talking to people over the past couple days that are really weighing on people. How do I know when I don't know who my next generation is? Or maybe I know who my next generation is, depending on ages of those in the audience, but I certainly don't know if my grandkids are going to be capable of running this. How do I know who to give ownership to? Do I give it equally to my children and then trust that they're going to have to figure out how to work together? Do I bet on one person, a controlling owner, something that I'm more comfortable with as a founder because that's how I ran this business? Or perhaps, what do I do if none of my children are capable of running this? Do I create a model where I bring in non-family leadership, or do I think about selling the business if I don't have anyone in the family to run it? And by the way, how do I make these decisions in an environment where it's completely unknown who's going to show up with both the interest and the capability to do that? So let me take a step back from the family business world and rely on a piece of my career much prior to that, which was the years I spent at McKinsey. I've met a number of audience members who had some stint, did their time at McKinsey, so maybe this will resonate with you. While I was there, I had the good fortune to work in the strategy practice under Hugh Courtney and Patrick Viguerie, and they actually wrote this acclaimed seminal article for Harvard Business Review while I was there called Strategy Under Uncertainty. Their key insight was that most of us tend to view the world as either pretty uncertain or completely uncertain. Pretty uncertain, we march forward. Completely uncertain, we're frozen. The truth of the matter is that most of the world is somewhere in between. There are a range of potential outcomes that could happen, and once we think about what that range is, then we can think about how do we want to react in terms of that range of outcomes. This is, by the way, going to be seriously the cliff notes of this article, and I encourage you all to access it because I find it super interesting. So what they came up with was, well, there are different postures you could take towards reacting to the level of uncertainty. One, which is, by the way, for most founders and entrepreneurs, the one we prefer is, I'm going to shape the future. I'm going to determine the outcome that we're going to have. How did that work for you this year? For me at Kellogg, not so well. So what I will tell you is certainly there's a case to be made for trying to impact how the future will turn out. For an example, that could be exposing your children to your business early, helping them understand what the purposes and the values are. That doesn't necessarily guarantee, however, that they're going to have the skills and interest to run the business. Another couple strategic postures, I could adapt to the future, do things that allow me to be flexible in multiple different outcomes. And the last would be reserve the right to play. What can I do that would allow me to not have to make that decision about what my ownership might look like in the future? So think about strategic postures. The last element of the model is, based on what posture I decide to take, there are different actions that may make sense. Big bets, just what you would expect. Craps table, put all your chips in one place. The roulette wheel, pick a number, right? These are strategies that can be wildly successful in one outcome but devastating in another. Most of you are here and because you don't intend to pursue any of these big bets, maybe save the last one. So selling to private equity, big bet, right? Are these people going to help me grow? I would say selling to an ESOP as well, depending on sort of the growth trajectory of your firm and the dynamics of your industry, is also a big bet that's pretty hard to reverse. You might take the company public with very limited examples. Levi Strauss is a fascinating one, by the way. They've gone public and private twice, and they almost use the public markets like private equity. Fascinating to me. Family owned, and for those of you on the West Coast know, have a significant social impact as well. You might make a big bet as well and say, I have one child I think is going to be the leader in the race. I'm going to give the business to that person. All of these are things that are really hard to reverse. Because of the unknowns of who's going to show up in that family circle and how they might fit into the ownership circle, I'm not a big fan of big bets. However, the good news is there are some other things you can think about that can set you up for success. What are no regrets moves? I love these. Things that in any outcome are good actions to take. Early estate planning, first and foremost. If you listen to one of my colleagues at Booth who runs the private wealth program, he will say that you are more likely to lose your business to taxes than any other source of economic drain. By the way, based on what we're seeing legislatively, that's likely to get worse and not better. And again, uncertainty and outside of our control, right? So estate planning, a lot of people hesitate to want to pass down part of their ownership because they don't know if their kids are going to be capable. Good news is that with some help, you can figure out how to do that in a way that you can give up some economic interest but not control. A strong management team. I know everyone in the room would believe in that anyway, but a strong management team in a family business context is important for so many reasons. First of all, it's an emergency succession plan should something happen to you. Second of all, it surrounds your next generation family members with good role models that could help support them over time in their own development. And third, guess what? If that kid that you thought was going to win the race doesn't end up showing up interested or prepared to do this, you've got a backup plan, right? So no regrets move, build a really strong management team. Last one, maybe less obvious, engage, and this says stakeholders, but I'm really thinking specifically about shareholders and really your next gen family members in understanding and appreciating your purpose and actually in being part of creating it. I heard someone give a talk about the concept of legacy, and if legacy is backward looking and not future looking, you're set up for success. So we've heard a lot about next gen people in here resonating. This is how we've done it for the past 100 years, and you should be proud of this. Certainly there's a piece of legacy that's that, but the ability to have an impact on that legacy and be part of it as a next generation person is really compelling. And I will tell you, if those next gen members don't even plan to ever be employed by this business, but they're going to be owners, patient capital comes from people who believe in your purpose. So really important to think about how to engage that next generation and young. Our multi-gen group that I had the good fortune of being with yesterday afternoon, we talked about one of the leading factors actually in attracting next gen members, research shows, is bringing your kids to work. Have them sit beside you. All of our group, it was fascinating. We went around the room and we asked, what's your earliest childhood memory? It was sweeping the floors. It was sitting in the truck. It was the stuff that isn't about walking through a spreadsheet. It was just being there, being present. So engaging your next gen is that can be really valuable. And the last thing, what are some options, some paths that you could take that may create option value in the future and have very low significant negative impact? Expose your next gen to the business. And by this, I'm not talking about the sitting so much in the side, but consider internship opportunities. Take them to trade shows with you. Help them understand not just the what of the decisions you make, but the why. What really drives this business? How do we make money? How does this work? Next gens who are exposed to the business are going to be much more likely to want to participate in some fashion. And by the way, we talk a lot about training good owners in the multi-generational family context. They could be a great board member. They could be a champion for what you could do. You can, your brand, they could be involved in your philanthropy, but having next gens that appreciate your business, even if they're never going to come to work for you, is a really valuable asset to have. The last two more business related, diversification. If you look at 100-year-old plus family businesses, none of them, not surprisingly, are in the business today that they were 100 years ago. Some of them are in businesses that have tweaked and adapted, but most of them aren't in the same business at all. They got out of one, they got into others. Diversification, you know, when I was coming up as a strategy professor in the public company market, not recommended. Do what you're good at. In the family business setting, it creates optionality. We talk a lot about the concept of being a family in business as opposed to a family business. What a family in business means is we're in business together, we're creating wealth, we want to have an impact. What that business is can be fungible over time. So diversification allows you the opportunity to stay together, but the flexibility to do that, and what gives you a capacity to react to market conditions as well as react to what's meaningful to your next generation. And finally, a family office. I want to share a story from a family-owned business called the Lockton Companies. Many of you may know them because they're insurance brokerage to large companies. So Lockton is the largest private insurance brokerage. They're owned by two first-gen lines of the Lockton family. For years, they invested all their capital to grow the business, to consolidate the market, to increase their market share. At some point, they decided the returns on consolidating market share were decreasing, and the risk of having all their eggs in one basket was increasing. So what they did was they took their capital and they actually dividended it out into a family office. The idea was, I will take some risk off of if anything happens to the business. I will create an opportunity in a pool of funds that family members who are not involved in the business might have some way that they can engage if they're not involved in insurance. But third, I have a have capital over here that I could actually loan back to the business if I needed to grow or in a rainy day. And so they kept the capital close as opposed to distributing it all out to family members, and that created an opportunity for them, an option for the future. More and more I see families doing this with their liquid capital. So, multi-generational family paths. You can pass on ownership but not control. We've already talked about that. You could certainly consider employee ownership that's not your entire employee base as a way to raise capital. One quick thing I want to take a note of is families love investing in families, never more so than today. There are significant number of captive private equity firms that are owned by families that don't have a duration on them. What they want to do is believe in and support other family investors. So I know PE can be a really negative term in this room, but I would think about families as supporters of other families and as a way to actually partner with someone that could really believe in your business. And the last I want to leave you with is the concept of an active owner. All of you are operating owners. You're very comfortable in that bucket. I have decision-making control from both a governing and an operating standpoint. Over time, what we see in family businesses is that owners migrate to the right. We end up with some people who end up in a governing owners bucket, so they may be on a board of directors in a strategic decision-making capacity, but not in a day-to-day operating capacity. Over time, as the ownership group gets larger, you end up with people who we hope are active owners. They show up at shareholder meetings, they participate, they're cheerleaders, they contribute, they read their financial statements, they understand what that drives this business, and they want to continue to dedicate their capital to this business. Where you don't want to be is investing owners, people who treat this as indifferent to anything else in the marketplace and are looking for a dividend check. So think hard about where you want to be and how do you cultivate that model of creating active owners over time, and how do you get comfortable with the fact that it's okay if my son or daughter may not want to run this business, there's still a way to make this effectively a family enterprise, and I see them every day, and they're truly inspiring businesses to work around. So what do I leave you with? Family enterprise is complex. This is not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of work. We talked about the laws of unintended consequences yesterday. You can't predict what's going to happen, although you can talk to your peers here. But know that if you commit to this, it will be a lot of work outside of just your business itself. Let go of the notion that what got you here today will get you to tomorrow. The controlling owner model may not be the way to move forward as a family business. And then think about this McKinsey concept of applying, how do I plan for the unknown? What are actions I can take today that will help secure a future that looks good for me? And by all means, try to avoid big bets. Thank you.